You should get a message on your screen. Lovely. Right. Okay. So first things first, I will share my screen and hopefully you should be able to see that. Lovely. Okay, fantastic. Right. So firstly, thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time this morning to come along. This shouldn't take too long. This should only probably be around about half an hour, 45 minutes tops. So Um, one of the things that I do is I basically spend a lot of time working with clients around business growth and business development and stuff like that, and supporting businesses in and business owners in how to have skills to improve their business and grow their business. Now, one of the really, really common problems people face is that of sales. And sales is often a challenge because what you find with a lot of business owners is they're experts at what they do. They're very, very good at what they do. But when it comes to sales, there tends to be some kind of block. And everybody thinks that being a salesperson, you've got to be like the old 1980s double glazing salesperson that is really, really pushy and is an absolute nightmare. Won't leave the house until they've got something signed up and everything like that. And I'm very much of the belief that sales, everybody can do sales. And with sales, it's very much a case of you sell yourself every day. You know, when you meet new people, you're trying to build relationships with those people and everything else. So really what you're doing is you are naturally selling yourself and you're selling your personality. But when you put sales in front of the word conversation, what often happens is people get very flustered with that and they think, I can't do that and everything else. But what I try to encourage people is sales is a process. Yes, you do have to look at certain things, but actually it really is very, very conversational. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of information about sales. So the next few sessions are all around improving your sales. So we've got sessions on prospecting, which is today. Then we're going to be talking about qualification in the next session. The session after that, we're going to be talking about how to sort of utilize the two previous stages to improve your pitch. And then we're going to be talking about objection handling and then closing. So that's over the next few sessions. But obviously, this one is going to be talking about prospecting and around how you actually fill that sales pipeline with everything. So we're going to look at two things in particular. Firstly, the different tools that you can use to prospect and how you can use and implement them. And then the second thing I'm going to talk about are the four stages of prospecting, because like in business, the way I look at it, everything could have a process, should have a process. And if it has a process, then you can effectively reflect on it, refine on it, measure it, and improve it. So that's what we're going to be going through today. So the first thing I wanted to show you is a sales funnel. So some of you may have seen this before. And the sales prospecting obviously fits in at the very, very top of the sales funnel. Now, sales prospecting is basically the activity of identifying and contacting potential customers to generate new revenue. And the important word in that statement really is identifying. So what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that your prospecting is powerful. You need to make sure that you are basically answering the need that your clients have. So the the reason why targeted prospecting is so important is the better the quality that you put into the top of the funnel, the more that comes out at the bottom of the funnel, the more good stuff that comes out at the bottom of the funnel. And that's why targeting is so important. So the other thing to be remembering as well is even when you're busy, you've always got to be prospecting. So it's really, really important, no matter how busy you are, you continue prospecting. So if you look at that sales funnel and you look at it as a series of stages that you go through, basically what happens is as you go through those stages, if you don't put prospecting in the top and you've got various different people at various different points in the sales process and you stop prospecting because you're busy, what you're going to end up with is a gap in one of those bands. And as that band goes through that sales funnel, what will happen is you'll eventually get to the point where you're closing deals and deals won't happen because there's nothing to close because you're not as advanced in that sales process. So I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind when you're thinking about prospecting and everything else, is to make sure that you always do it. And that's something that I always say to everybody: always be prospecting, because without that, you will end up with a dry period in your sales funnel. So it's worth making sure that you always account sometime during your week for finding new business and doing that. Now, the question is, how do you go ahead and do that? So there are many, many different prospecting techniques, and I'm going to run through quite a few here. And at the end of going through this part, if you've got any questions you want to ask about these techniques, anything that you might find challenging or whatever, then please do ask, because actually what's important to me in doing this is you get the benefit of knowledge that you can then utilize and take back to your own business. So the first one is the dreaded cold calling. Now, the reason I put this first and the reason I call it the dreaded cold calling is because everybody really hates cold calling. Even people that cold call for a living don't like cold calling very much. There's so many times you can get told no in a day and it not bother you. However, it is something that is a very, very good practiced way of doing it. Now, when I ran a sales team a number of years ago, I had about 7 or 8 sales staff that were working for me. What we used to do is we used to have a cold calling hour. And the reason we would do that is because it would basically mean we had that focused point where we would sit down and do cold calling, and the whole sales team would do it, myself included. And what we would do is we would prepare our list the day before, and then the following day we would then work our way through it. Now, I would typically prepare about 20 names. Sometimes I would get through all 20 names. Sometimes I would get through 3 of those names. Depends on whether people pick the phone up, depends on whether I spoke to them. The real trick with cold calling is to make sure that you have some kind of, not a script, but some kind of opening line that you can open with. Now, if your cold calling is targeted, now remember I talk about targeted. If your cold calling is targeted and you're targeting the right people, what you really need to do is you know the problems and the challenges that those people face. So your opening gambit, as some people call it, is basically you're talking about those things to see if you can generate some interest with the person that you're talking to. And then hopefully that leads into a conversation. Now, like I say, sales is a conversation. Don't think too much about it as being anything other than that. So cold calling is one of those things that people use as a way of prospecting for new business. The second one that people use is email marketing. So again, we've all done it where we create our own lists, but you can also buy lists. You can generate your own lists, you can buy lists, and you can send emails out to various different people with hopefully some kind of call to action where they get into contact with you. Again, it's a fairly effective way of prospecting, particularly if your list is very targeted and you're answering a problem that is specific to the target market that you're trying to attract, and a specific problem that you particularly solve. So again, that's another one. Next up, we've got good old-fashioned social media. So there are obviously many different platforms out there that you can use for social media. So some people use TikTok, some people use LinkedIn, some people use Facebook, some people use Twitter. It really doesn't matter. The important thing to remember with social media is what you're doing is you're using a platform that your clients are likely to sit on. So again, with social media, you can be networking into groups. So obviously, Facebook has got the ability to go into particular groups. LinkedIn, there are also groups on LinkedIn. So if you can access those groups where your clients are likely to sit, then again, that's something else that you can approach people with. Then we've got networking. Now, for me, networking is probably one of the best forms of generating business for myself, new business for myself. And I genuinely believe part of the reason behind that is because you get to talk to people face to face. You get to let people see your personality. You get to build a relationship with people before you actually start having business conversations with them. And networking works quite well. But a lot of people think about networking and they think it as business networking. They think it's going to a pub. They think it's joining, maybe going to like an organized, structured networking group like BNI or something like that. It's not just that. You can network at the school gate. You can network at barbecues. You can network at clubs that you go to and various other things as well. As long as you let people know what you do, people know people, and people can open those doors. And if you build a good relationship with people networking, those doors can open up. I want to give you a bit of an example of how my wife networks. So my wife runs her own jewelry business. what she does is she makes bespoke pieces of jewelry for people. And her clients are typically higher net worth individuals who have a fairly lumpy disposable income. As a result of that, she goes to yoga. Now, she actually enjoys yoga as well. You know, she's not there just purely for business reasons. But the number of times she goes to yoga with her business cards and happens to give business cards away to people who she's talked to at the yoga class, particularly afterwards as they're stood around talking, tidying up, and everything else. So again, think about where your clients are likely to be hanging out, and you can network in all sorts of ways. So networking doesn't have to be that formal business, go to a pub, stand up there, do your 60-second pitch, and then make platitudes to people and everything else. There are different types of it. The last session I did was on referrals, so I'm not going to go into too much depth on referrals, but referrals are a fantastic way of generating new business for yourself as well. And I talk in the previous session about 4 different types of referral marketing that you can do. And as a result of that, you can generate some really, really good business. Now, the real benefit of referred business is the fact that it's typically warm business. And as a result of that, what you're able to do is you're able to actually have a conversation with somebody simply because you know that you've been referred into them and you know they have a need for your services. So referrals are very powerful. Again, that's another one of my main methods of generating business for myself. The next one up is content marketing. So content marketing is really about creating engaging content for people that you're talking to. And the important word there is engaging content. Make your content worthwhile, make your content informative. And what will happen is people will then realize that you're an expert in what you do, and hopefully they will contact you. The important thing with any content marketing that you do is you have to make sure that you have some kind of call to action, or you have to make sure that people know how to contact you should they be able to. The great thing about LinkedIn is if you're doing something that's good and people like, you can then engage with them through the messaging system within LinkedIn. They can engage with you as well. So again, another way of doing it. Lead databases. So this is something that that you can buy. You can buy from various lead companies. Sometimes you can't be too sure of the quality of the data that you're buying. You don't know how up to date the data is. However, again, using something like LinkedIn, you've got the Sales Navigator tool on LinkedIn, which you can use, and you can create your own lists. And then you've got various different plugins that you can put into LinkedIn that allows you to harvest email addresses and telephone numbers from those lists. So that's actually had quite a big impact on the lead database companies, because obviously what they're doing is they're trying to supply these leads to people, and people are now able to generate their own leads from technology that's out there. But again, you're going very, very targeted. You know who your market is, you know who you're wanting to speak to, and you're being very, very specific about that. The great thing about LinkedIn Sales Navigator is you can look at the size of the business that you're trying to attract. You can look at the job description of the person that you're trying to attract. You can look at various other features like location. It's very, very powerful. So you can do some really good searches, and you can really, really drill down into the types of people that you want to have conversations with. This is existing clients is another very, very often untapped source of new business. The number of people who don't speak to their existing clients about the work that they are doing and the other services and products that they offer is phenomenal. And it's probably the easiest form of new business as well, because these people know you, they like you, they trust you, you've got a relationship with them, they know you're very good at what you do because they're repeating the purchases and that sort of thing. So it's always worth staying in very, very close contact with your existing clients and the people that you're working with, because ultimately what will happen is when you're talking to them about new products or services that you're offering, or additional products or services that you can offer, they're going to be much more receptive to listening to those, particularly if you're having a conversation with them and you notice a need for those services within that conversation that you have. Competitor analysis is a good one. And this is something I used to get my sales team to do. People say, well, how can you prospect through competitor analysis? Some people very kindly like to put quotes and testimonials up on their websites about who they're working with. And also they like to put quotes and testimonials up on their LinkedIn and things like that, who they're working with. So if you're connected with them on LinkedIn, or you can go on their websites, you can often see who the people are that they're working with. Now, it might be that those people are very, very close to the company, hence the reason they've given a testimonial or whatever. But it might open up new business markets for you. It might give you an idea of, if my competitor is working with clients in this industry, then potentially I could work with clients in that industry as well. So again, competitor analysis is something that's a great way of doing some prospecting. Advertising is a popular one as well. And a lot of people do advertising. So they'll advertise in magazines, they'll advertise on websites, and they'll advertise on posters. Don't, particularly if you're working in the local industry, or you're working in the local market, don't dismiss posters. Because if you're working locally, posters can be an exceptionally powerful way of advertising. If you're going into, if you have like clients that you work for on a regular basis, that Nicole on this call, for example, she's within her business, what she does is she goes around different motor workshops, and as a result of that, what they can do is they can leave posters, or they can leave adverts on desks for various different mechanics within the workshop to come and buy more of their products and things like that. So advertising is something that works quite well. But again, what you've got to do is you've got to make sure you're advertising in the right space. There's no point you advertising at the local football ground, for example, if you're a business to business market. But if you're in the business consumer market, advertising, taking an advert out in a local football brochure or magazine or something like that might be worth doing. So be targeted with it, be specific about it. This is a good one. Sponsorship. Now, sponsorship of local clubs and charities can be exceptionally powerful, particularly if you're working in a business to consumer environment. So I'll give you a bit of an example. An old client of mine still runs a vehicle hire business. And I was networking with him one day, and in our networking group, we had a hospice there. And the hospice were publicizing to try and generate more business, generate sort of donations, so they could actually buy a new van. And that was the thing that they were looking to do. So my client, who had the vehicle hire business, what he decided to do was go up to them and say, look, instead of you generating donations to get the new van, what I'll do is I will donate a van to you, as long as I can have my sponsorship branding all over the van as well. So when it's driving around, people know who I am. And I'd also like you to publicize the fact that we're doing a van for you throughout your network. Now, in the local area where he was setting up a new depot, basically they had 7,000 sponsors within that particular town. So as a result of that, the message went out to their supporters or their sponsors, and said about what Ross was doing and the fact that he was donating a van, and there was a new depot that was going to open up in that town. And when he opened the doors, pretty much with full books, to the point where he needed to get more vehicles in to cope with the demand that had come through the supporters from the charity, who wanted to support his business as well, because he had done such a good donation to them. This led him on to realizing that sponsorship was a real thing for him. So he ended up sponsoring the local football team in his local town where his existing depot was. And he also sponsored the rugby team in the town that he was in. And his sales soared massively because he was supporting the local community. He then decided to open another depot in High Wycombe. And he ended up sponsoring Wycombe Wanderers Football Club by providing their manager with a vehicle to drive around in. As a result of that, when he opened the Wycombe branch, all of a sudden he found that he had a lot more. He opened it with quite a surge of orders, because fans of the club were thinking, well, actually, he's supporting our club, so we're going to support his business as well. So sponsorship works really, really well. However, that's a really positive case of how sponsorship works. I had another client who was insistent that he wanted to sponsor his son's local football team. And I was actually quite against it, because basically his business was a commercial vehicle repair business, and it was, how many people who own commercial vehicles were going to be needing repair within that sort of demographic that he was looking to work with. And as a result of that, he basically put 1,500 quid into his son's local sports business, and nothing happened as a result of it. So again, you have to know your market, you have to know what you're trying to approach. The next one is events and trade shows and public speaking. So very, very powerful. When you've got a stand at a trade show, you get lots of people come on the floor. And again, if you're making sure that the right sort of people are going to be walking through that door, people who could potentially be your clients, then brilliant. If you have a stand at a trade show, you might be able to do a speaking gig at the trade show as well. You can also do speaking gigs at various different events, particularly if you're in a business-to-business event, for example. You might be able to offer your services for free to run a speaking gig at a trade show. Not a trade show, a networking event or something along those sorts of lines. So again, another opportunity, and it's about getting your profile out there, and it's about getting yourself known. And it's about making, if you're going to do a speaking gig, it's about making your topic interesting. Don't use it as a sales pitch. Do it as something that people are going to actually get use out of, rather than making it so, this is me, I'm great at what I do, I really love working with people, and can you come and buy from me? That's not going to work. People aren't going to be interested in that. However, if you address a problem that a lot of those people in that room might be experiencing, and then you talk about that, that's the problem that you solve. That's how you get people involved with that as well. Not lastly, strategic alliances is another one that you can potentially do. So strategic alliances work particularly well when you've got a group of people who are working together, who can work together but have the same client base but different type, but offer a different service. So a really good example for this might be trades. So trades, for example, you might have a plasterer, an electrician, a plumber, a brickie, and a ground worker. All of those people are going to be working with people who are going to be building houses, or having the houses built, and actually they can refer that work in there and cross-refer amongst each other for different projects that they're working on. And that works with different groups of industries as well. That works with the marketing industry, that works with the finance industry, that works with the HR industry as well. So you get different groups of people working together, potentially cross-referring and everything else. And actually, strategic alliances work quite well. If you want to know more about strategic alliances, I talk about that in the previous video that's up on YouTube that I mentioned earlier. Digital marketing is again another way that you can advertise and you can promote yourself. So digital marketing is typically something like search engine optimization or search engine marketing or pay-per-click advertising or something along those sorts of lines. But again, it's another way that you can prospect and you can do things with that. Now, I'm not an expert on digital marketing. I do know it works quite well. It can be quite expensive, but actually, if the rewards that you get for it outweigh the cost that you're paying for it, it's something that could be worth considering for you as well. So that's the different prospecting techniques. So has anybody got any questions on those? Because obviously I just want to run through them, but I've just bombarded you with a load of information, and rather than go on to the next thing, I'd just rather sort of ask if anybody's got any questions. I'm seeing shaking of heads. Paul is nodding nicely. Okay, so what I'll do then is I will move on to the next part then. So this is kind of the 4 stages that I think of prospecting. Like everything, like I said before, everything to me has very much a process. And if it's a business orientated thing, you can have a process and you can operate a process. And what it does is when you operate a process, it gives you the opportunity to refine and improve that process as time goes on. So you may start with a particular process, but after a year or two, you might be operating a very different version of that process because you've refined it over a period of time. And this is the process really to prospecting. So the first thing that you need to do is build a list of target clients. So to do that, you need to know who your ideal target client is. Now, you may have heard the expression building an avatar, a client avatar. which is essentially a client profile. And the marketeers refer to it as an avatar. But basically what you do is you can build an avatar for both in the both business to consumer world, but you can also build one in the business to business world as well. So typically in the business to consumer world, you're going to be looking at who your typical demographic is, you know, what sort of income those people have, what sort of disposable income they might have. It might be that your business that you offer is very gender specific. Take, for example, my wife, she works mainly with ladies because she's a jewelry maker. She does have male customers as well, but typically the customers that she works with are female. Um, you might find out what they like to do socially. You might find out where they like to hang out socially. They may hang out in particular types of pubs or clubs or whatever. It might be that they go to particular groups like yoga, for example, like I mentioned earlier. It might be that they go to the gym. It could be a whole manner of different things. So if you know those sorts of things, then that builds a profile of the type of individual that you're trying to approach. If you're in a business to business environment, you might be looking at various other different things. So you might look at the industry that you serve. So it might be that you're specific to one particular type of industry and you like working in that industry and you want to really niche down within that industry. It might be that you need to know the level of buyer that you're speaking to. Sometimes that might be the business owner. Sometimes that might be the finance director. Sometimes that might be the procurement manager. It really, really depends on who you're talking to within the industry, but you need to make sure you're speaking to the right person within that industry. If you're speaking to somebody, for example, who is a salesperson within a large corporate, that person is unlikely to have the buying decision to purchase your products or services. However, they may know somebody who sits fairly senior within the business and they can introduce you to them. So you don't want to give a big sales pitch to somebody who's not got the decision making ability to buy from you. But what you may do is you may be able to get that introduction to the person you want to speak to. So you might also want to know the type of organization, the size of organization you deal with. You might want to you may already have a client that you have a working relationship with, and there may be different departments within that business, and you can expand out within that business because you've got those different ideas you can go to. And there might be something like a world event that may have a need or a trigger for your services. So obviously, Maritza, you're in HR, and later on this month, we know that Labour are going to release some new rules on HR and how that's going to impact businesses. So, which is a fantastic opening tool for you to approach your clients with to talk about the various different things. I mean, you're probably already doing it now, but when you're approaching new businesses, you could be talking about, have you considered the fact of what employment from employee rights from day one means, as opposed to employee rights from 2 years down the line, because that's obviously going to be quite a major change for lots of different businesses. So there might be world events that trigger a need for your services or something along those lines. So in my case, just to give you a bit of an understanding of what I look for, I work with micros and micro businesses and sole business owners. People who are typically feeling isolated, typically they're on Facebook or they're on LinkedIn, and generally speaking, they turn over less than about £500,000. People who come to me more often than not all the time, but more often than not, are at a point where they're banging their head against a brick wall. Their partner doesn't want to listen to them talk about their business anymore. They really don't know which way to turn. They're suffering with a little bit of overwhelm and they're feeling very, very isolated. So they're the typical traits of the sorts of people that I tend to work for. So when I'm doing my marketing and stuff like that, they're the things that I talk about, because they're the things that people are generally will be able to relate to. So the second stage of prospecting is do your research. Now, you can never do too much research. The more research you do, the more informed you are of a particular prospect or something like that. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to build an understanding of that individual. You're trying to build an understanding of that particular business. You're trying to build an understanding of the problems that business faces. And what that will do is that will give you an idea of how you can solve and resolve those problems or challenges that they face. So that's the other thing that you want to be talking about. So do as much research as you possibly can to build an understanding of the business. And you can do research in many different ways. So, for example, you can look at their social media profiles. You can look at LinkedIn. You can look on Facebook. You can look at Instagram. You can look on Twitter. You can look on, or X as it is now. You can look on the various different things like that. You can visit their website. You can explore what's going on the website. You can look at the target market that they're going for as well. Because if you're already working with people in the same industry, you are going to have an insider knowledge of the types of challenges and problems that those people potentially could be facing. So when you look at the website, you will be able to ascertain as to whether that is the ideal client for you, and if you're working with any similar businesses, and you can then incorporate the solutions that you do for those similar businesses, or understand the challenges that those businesses have, and you can assume that the target market that you're looking at will have similar ones. You can look at their LinkedIn activity. You can look at the experience that they have. You can look at the groups they've got. You can do a financial check on the business. People often sit there when I say financial check on the business, they think, oh, that's a little bit invasive, but actually it isn't, because you can use tools like Credit Safe, for example, which is a great credit checking tool. Now, wouldn't you'd much rather take on a business that's got a good credit reference or good credit record than a business that is a poor payer? There's no point taking on a client that is a poor payer. We made this mistake a few years ago. And in fact, actually caused the downfall of a business that I was running. Was we took on a client who had an absolutely appalling credit rating, but we didn't do a credit check on them. And unfortunately, what it did is they put loads and loads of work our way, never paid for it, and that took us under. So I can't stress how important understanding how how strong a credit risk when you're taking on a new client can be. The last thing as well on this side of things is look at Companies House. If you look on Companies House, you'll be able to have a look at their accounts and you'll be able to see what they're performing like also. So do your research, and that's a really important thing to look at. The next thing as well is tailor your offering. So make sure your offering is tailored to their needs. You understand their pain points, therefore you have a solution that suits their needs. And it's about them. It's not about you. The number of people I know who have sold and they sell, this is my product, it's fantastic, it does this, it does that, it does the other, my product is brilliant, I've created this wonderful product and it's going to be amazing. What you need to do is reframe that. This is the product, this is what it's going to do for you, this is how it's going to help you, this is the problem it's going to solve, and this is the outcome that you are going to get. So what I've done is I've reframed that, and I'm talking about what they are going to get out of using your product or service. And that's what it's about, tailoring your offering. Build a list of case studies and stories that illustrate the pain points and the solutions and how they can be met. That way you can illustrate to the client how it's worked for other people in their industry as well. What you're doing here is you're trying to build something that's basically educating to the client. You're sharing best practice. What you're doing is you're illustrating what's going to be the return on their investment when they're working with you. And you only can really do that by tailoring the offering. And then the last thing is create a campaign. Create a campaign that builds strong value-based offers. Design multiple touches across multiple different channels. What I mean by that is, if you're approaching someone, if you're prospecting for somebody and you know that this particular individual is your target person that you want to be speaking to, then what you want to do is contact them. You can contact them on LinkedIn, you can contact them on Facebook, but actually you can do it in a softer way. So you can find the posts that they're commenting on, you can connect with them, you can message them, you can email them, you can follow them on various social media channels that they're doing. What you're doing is your name will pop up all over the place. If you have connections that know the individual that you're talking to, again, what you're able to do is you're able to get those people to put in a good word for you. I'll give you an example of how this worked for me recently. So I was wanting to connect particularly with a solicitor based down here in Cornwall. She's based in Truro. I knew several people that knew her, but I didn't know her personally. So what I did was I connected with her on LinkedIn. I followed her on Facebook. Yeah, sort of connected with her on Facebook as well, so she knew who I was. But it was basically through their business page. I wasn't connecting with her personally. On LinkedIn, I did connect with her personally. I started following her posts. I started making comments on her posts. I tagged her into a few posts of mine that I thought she would be interested in. I'll be honest with you, I structured the post with her in mind, but I still tagged her in those posts. I then got a couple of people to talk to her and mention to her that about me and what I did and how I can potentially help and everything else. So that went on over a period of about 2 months. It then became apparent that she was going to be at the same networking event I was going to be at. So I messaged her and said, I hear you're going to be over at the YP networking event over in Penn Venton Park Hotel. And she said, yes, I am. And I said, fantastic. I'd love to have a conversation with you. So she went there knowing we were going to have a conversation. And as a result of that, we stood there, we had a chat for about half an hour. It was very productive. And actually, we've now got a working business relationship going. So I was very specific about who I wanted to speak to and why I wanted to speak to them. And I was very structured about it. The important thing to do with this is not to bombard people with information. Be strategic with your touches. Don't be sort of that person that's messaging them every 10, 15 minutes or whatever, because that's just going to upset them and they're not going to want to know anything about you. But be strategic about it. Leave it every few days. What will happen is you will come up on their radar. And when it comes to talking to them, they'll go, oh, yeah, I've heard of you. They won't necessarily know where they've heard of you from, but they will know that they've heard of you. And find opportunities to connect with them. You know, from people, if you know somebody who knows them, you know, do a bit of research. Like I say, in stage number 2, I think it was, do your research, do that finding out. When you're contacting people again, always include clear calls to action. So, in summary, use the prospecting techniques that work for you. I gave you 14 prospecting techniques. There's no way on this earth you can use all 14 of those prospecting techniques. I use 5. So use prospecting techniques that work well for you. Know who your target market is. Do your research into your prospects before you speak to them, because it gives you something that you can speak to them about. Make sure that you understand your challenges and pain points, and then finally tailor your offering to them, tailor your offering to those individuals. Make sure that you're structured in your approach. Okay, so that basically covers what I wanted to go through today. Have we got any questions? Feel free to just shout out any questions that you might have. Obviously, I've given you loads and loads of information. Silence at the other end of the call.
Sounds
No. Was that Paul?
so it sounds like it. Very quiet.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just a little bit about me. So I do 3 things really. So the first thing that I do is I mentor people on a one-to-one basis. Mainly it's business side of things, and I work with business owners. So if you know anybody who is struggling with overwhelm, or they need a little bit of direction or whatever, then that's the type of thing that I work with. And I'm always happy to receive referrals from people. I also run sort of networking groups, or not networking groups, they're more like peer groups, where you get groups of business owners together and we run through some various business skills. And the other thing that I do is I run some mastermind groups as well, which is where you have a group of individuals together. And what we do is we share challenges and problems that those people are facing. And then people from within the group are then able to give their input and their feedback. And what's great about that is you get lots of different people sort of piling in with loads of different ideas. And it becomes a volcano of ideas that causes an eruption of thoughts. There you go. There's a dramatic description for you. So that basically concludes what I wanted to talk to you all about this morning. That's me. If you want to get hold of me at all, you can get hold of me on that email address, and that is my telephone number as well. So what I shall do, I shall stop the recording. If I can find out how to stop the recording. There we go.